Hi, and welcome to episode number 14. My name is Alan. I'm the host, and this show, as always, features full-body open deep trance channel and best-selling author named April Crawford, and Veronica, which is our name for a causal plane entity who, she's the one that speaks to most of the clients that call in or visit in person. So the format basically is, as usual, April will say a few words of her own choosing, and then I'll present Veronica with some questions and comments and subjects. So hold on, and here's April.
Hi, everyone. It's April. This is my little moment every week where I get to talk. And I thought it might be interesting for everyone to know how it was in the very, very beginning when I first got into all this and where I met Alan. There was four of us. There was a guy named Ryan, a girl named Pam, myself, and Alan, who met several times a week to do channeling and work on stuff. I found out in that group that I was a channel. Pam was aspiring to be one. She was taking channeling classes, and so was Alan. And I think Ryan was too. And I became involved with them because, as I told you before, a bad breakup, and they, sort of coaxed me over every time they were doing it so that I wouldn't be by myself moping at home. So I started in this group, and once I had this epiphany that I was doing this, I did find it interesting, although I was really, really not open to letting everybody know about it. But the four of us did a lot of stuff in those early days, and I thought all of you might find it interesting to know what we were doing in that time frame. It was June of 1989, and we were meeting 3 or 4 times a week, having food together, then having a channeling sessions together, and sometimes we would also do past life runs. Now, past life runs was something that I always knew that I had had other lives, so I wasn't, prized by that, but I never knew you could do a past life run, so I was like, okay, me first, I'll do it. And we had gotten together one night, and it was decided that I would be the one that would be run. And I think Alan took me through the moment. And it was really surprising because my whole life this time, I've always been afraid of water. When I was a little kid, my mother took me to swim classes. I wouldn't even put my face in the water. I never really learned how to swim, and then it was like a dog paddle until my parents put in a pool, and I, started getting a little bit more comfortable with it. I had a terrible, terrible fear of getting water up my nose and that feeling of drowning. And I never could put my finger on why, but I just knew I didn't like water, and I didn't like swimming, and I didn't like water in general. I got better with it, but even to this day, it's like if water comes up to my chin, I get a panic. So what we found out is we did this past life run, and I'm only going to talk about the first half of it today. I was taken through. I remember waking up, and I didn't really know what had happened, but there's a transcript of it that I just recently looked at, and it kind of brought back a lot of things. And there was a life that I had where I was a guy who sat in a crow's nest on a ship. Now, I wondered how I got there, and I read through the transcript as they took me through this past life run. And apparently I signed up originally. I sold myself into servitude to be on a ship because I said clearly I had nothing, I was nothing. I had parents that had died by fire, and I don't know what that meant, whether they were burned or they just, burned up in a fire somewhere, but I was begging on the streets, and I decided I wanted to be on a ship. And the earliest memory I have was being on the wharf begging, and I sold myself into servitude to be on this ship. Now, what I ended up doing was being on a crow's nest up, and every time they asked what I was doing, I said I was watching. And I thought it was interesting because what was said was I was watching for the end of the earth so that they wouldn't fall off. I thought that was really interesting that they thought that way. And I was asked the name, and clearly I didn't have one. I didn't have one that I could recall. And according to the transcript, I thought my name was Bloody Filth because that's what the captain of the ship called me, Bloody Filth. And I was in rags, but I was up in this crow's nest for a long, long time. I was maybe 26, 27 years old, and I had done that since I'd been 12, and that's what I did. I watched. And there was many places we went to, but we did get overcome by, I guess it was pirates. We were taken over, and I was treated as probably a slightly bit better, but my job again was still a crow's nest. I was always up in it. We went to the Polynesian area, and according to the transcript again, I was quite taken back by the women there, and quite taken back by, the abundance there. It was warm, there was good food, and this was all going on like really in the first weeks of the group. And Alan asked, well, what did you do while you were there? And that was funny for me to say this. He says, we took their women. I was like, what? Their women? Oh, my God. And being a girl this time, it was kind of like, oh, dear. That was kind of bad. I probably shouldn't have asked that question. And there was also another part of it where I was getting off the ship and somehow got my hand stuck. And it was like the gangplank coming down, not the gangplank you would jump off of, but the gangplank coming down into the water so I could get to the island. And I got my hand stuck somehow. It was my finger. And the captain this pirate captain guy had no patience. And when I said my hand was stuck and I was holding up the line, he cut my finger off. And according to the transcript, that wasn't fun. And having no patience and just cutting my finger off was like, to me, like, oh my God, what kind of existence was this? I mean, because when you think of past life stuff, a lot of people say, oh, I was an Egyptian princess. Oh, I was in King Henry's court. Oh, I was some sort of, magnificent being and, more elaborate than I am now. And here I am dressed in rags on a crow's nest on a pirate ship in the South Pacific, and getting my finger cut off because I didn't get off the ship fast enough. It went on for a long time. I mean, as I read through the transcript, and I vaguely remember some of this, but when I read the transcript, it gives me what I can tell you. And that life went on for a very long time. Maybe from the time I was 12, and I think it was like maybe 29, 30, that I finally died. And I read through the transcript a little further, and how I died was that I fell out of the crow's nest into the water. And the impact of it was startling, but there was a real feeling, according to what was being said, of water going up my nose and sinking down to the bottom and seeing murkiness and being able to see. And there was a little bit of panic at first, and then suddenly I was breathing the water, which I think meant I was dead. Kind of put it with what I have now, because every time I get water up my nose, water and water up to my chin, or I'm underwater, total panic. So I'm thinking that this life might have had a lot to do with that. Now, of course, this life, as I crossed out of it, there were, in the transcript, questions asked as I was crossing out of it, and where I wanted to go next, and what I wanted to do next, and what subject I wanted to talk about. And it looks like that a lot of it was loyalty and betrayal. So this particular life, I believe, was very much about loyalty and learning to value the self. And next week, I'm going to do the second half of this, where we moved into a life that was in Spain. And it was during the Spanish Inquisition. It kind of segued right into the Spanish Inquisition. And, of course, Alan was involved in that, and we'll get into that little topic next week. But past life runs can be very fun and vastly interesting if you have a belief system that maybe includes that, or you're just plain curious about where you've been and what you've done. And you don't have to be famous. You don't have to have had a lot of money to have a really vivid experience. I was a beggar kid in a crow's nest at the age of 12, and I stayed there till about the age of 29. And I think I died maybe early 30s. But in this transcript, I was talking like I was so old. Nowadays, if you're 30, it's like, okay, I'm really beginning. In that time frame, and I think it was like the early 1500s, maybe late 1400s, I was looking at myself as an old man. So if you have the means to do this, we think it's a good thing to do because it opens up your mind, it opens up your consciousness, and might explain some of the phobias that you have in this life that are pretty inexplicable. I can remember my mom saying, why can't you swim? Why are you afraid of water? There's no reason to be afraid of water. And at the time, I was like, I don't know, but now I do know. So it kind of explained a lot of things. So next week, I'll talk about the next life as we move forward into the Spanish Inquisition.
Thank you, April. And I'll just remind our audience that as a Deep Trance channel, April had no idea what, if anything, actually happened. All she's been able to recount is what I've told her, because I have a perfect memory of all the sessions. And fortunately, I was gung-ho in those days and actually wrote down a detailed transcript, and you just got the cliff notes. It was emotional. It was intense. It was incredible. And also, we call it a past life run because or something that had that title in when we first started, and that's what we tried to do. And it turned out that we did it for everybody, but April was like, kind of off the charts. And years later, I was talking to Veronica about, kind of how unusual April's abilities are. And Veronica says, you don't know the half of it. She says, not only because when April goes to a past life regression, it's not like you see on television. This is highly detailed, dialogue, the whole 9 yards. Veronica told me that not only is April capable of doing that kind of past life regression for herself, she's able to regress at the same level, same detail, into other people's past lives. And in fact, I've had it where she's gone to someone's future lives. So anyway, that's just kind of like what we're doing. And as April said, we're going to look at these past life run, which, by the way, was continuous, which meant she died, she drowned. We talked to her in between lives, and then the life in Spain where somebody unfortunately got burned at the stake by the Spanish Inquisition. So now we're waiting for Veronica to come through. Usually Veronica comes through. She's here. Okay, Veronica. Here is the first question. It's by Organic. It's a comment on the radio show. And she said, can you please ask Veronica about the importance of breath from a spiritual perspective?
Well, breathing is we'll say the fuel by which your body exists. And air is invisible, just like a lot of other things are invisible. And you take in the air and you exhale the air. And as you do that, it allows the biology to calm down a bit. It allows the biology to maybe think without all the chaos constantly intersecting and jumbling everything up. So meditation practices are pretty strict about how you breathe and how you perceive things while you're breathing. So we do think it's an incredibly important tool for those of you who are trying to aspire to do things that are a little bit more elevated and esoteric than just the plain linear environment.
Thank you, Veronica. The next question is an interesting take on karma. And I know we talked a little bit about this in the past and probably will again because so many people are interested in it. But this angle, it said, I've heard someone say that the reason a certain person has cancer is because of their karma. Now, in my case, I've always thought of karma as a balancing between individuals, maybe even between nations, but I've never even considered getting sick because of karma or getting cancer because of karma.
Well, karma can be between people. It also can be between events and people. And perhaps most of the time, cancer is a very emotional disease. It can be brought upon by a grand imbalance in the emotional threads. But it also can be this. Say in a lifetime you were participatory with maybe someone who was afflicted with maybe a mental disease, and you treated this person pretty poorly and caused them to be much worse off and not show them any compassion or empathy regarding their illness, especially if it's a mental illness, because further back mental illness was feared rather than comforted. So you come back into another life where you're carrying with you the imbalance of your judgment of someone who had an affliction that they could not fix on their own, that they had to sort of deal with it as they went through. You could very likely contract the same thing, experience it from that angle so that you could bring balance to yourself and your perspective on some sort of mental illness. It can be also with cancer. It can be also with maybe someone who, in the current linear, just simply didn't like anybody who was in a wheelchair, anybody who was, considered not 100%. And perhaps in another life they had a direct opinion about it, maybe made fun of the person. And so they come back into this life to have a better understanding of what they did by having the affliction themselves. So there is sort of a karmic thing here that's not necessarily always between people. Sometimes it's between action and yourself. Sometimes it's the way you judge people and yourself. And sometimes it's having an opinion that's completely inappropriate. And you would have no understanding how inappropriate that is until you have the infliction yourself. So there are lots of levels of karma, and that's some of them.
Thank you, Veronica. This is a question that also came in on the comments, the section from the radio broadcast, and that is, are there any things that you're not allowed to say to us? Any things you're not allowed to say to us?
Well, there really isn't any, we'll say, cosmic police running around. But we do not predict the future. That is one thing that we are pretty steadfast on. And we've had many people who would say, oh, well, we know you don't predict the future, but could you this time? And it's important for all of you to know that you create your own reality and that the choices you make are what creates your future. Now, we would encourage you to think clearly so that you can create that future. But it's not that we're not allowed to do it. We choose not to do it because it would rob you of the experience of making the correct choices to make your life the way you want it to be. There is no higher element that shakes a finger at us and says, oh, no, 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 you mustn't. We can pretty much talk about anything except predicting the future.
Thank you, Veronica. Now, in the early days, not so much lately, but you've mentioned that you've been married a few times. And you've essentially said that, well, that kind of helps you talk to people when they have marital issues they want to discuss. I was wondering if you could just describe any one of those marriages, good, bad, indifferent, what you learned, because we do get people writing in and say they like to hear your stories about one of your past lives.
Yes, we have had about 142 times where we have participated in the marriage of union or union of marriage. We can search through. There was a life where, we'll say it was, it looks like Gaul. Now, Gaul was an early section of France. It would take you back probably to 1000, 1100, 1200 or so. And in that life, we were a woman. And in that time frame, women were considered mostly bargaining chips. They really didn't have a lot of say about what went well or what wasn't going to go well. I mean, you were used as a bargaining chip by your father. Oh, and if you didn't have a father, it was the oldest brother who used you as a bargaining chip. Now, in that particular life, we were scheduled for a participation with a gentleman. Now, we were maybe 14, 13 at the time. And our father, to create a bargain and to create an atmosphere of harmony for the family, married us off to a man who was his age, in his 40s. Now, you can imagine now that would be, everyone would be screaming from the room, pedophile, pedophile, pedophile. But in that time frame, it didn't really matter. Once you were of marrying age, you were allowed to marry someone much older than you if you wanted to. And it's not that we wanted to, it's as we were told to. Now, in that particular life, we were very much wanting to be educated. We had been allowed a little bit of that in reading, and we could write our name. We remember very well how proud we were that we were able to take a quill and write our name. Because as a woman, that it wasn't included normally in what a woman learned. Women learned how to sew. They learned how to cook. And most of all, they were there to create sons. That's what they were there for. And we were married off to this man. Now, we can remember very clearly the marriage day. We had not met him. We had not even spoken to him. And he looked old. He looked scary. But we were told by our father, this is what you must do. So we did. We found, even though he looked scary, he was a gentleman. He was one who appreciated our youth and appreciated the fact that he could have sons with us and therefore treated us very well. Now, we weren't expected to be happy about the marriage. We weren't expected to, have any opinion. We were just expected to do it. But he spoke to us. He allowed us to have, he brought in someone who would, bring in music for us. And he was very kind to us and also allowed us to have tutors who would teach us how to read and write more. So it turned out to be a lot better than we thought. And there was sort of an amicable feeling between us, which we felt very blessed to have in that particular life because we had many friends and family members who were married into marriages that weren't so nice, where the prospective bridegroom had some mental issues. And we were blessed that this man was kind to us. We bore him 4 sons and 2 daughters, which he treated equally as his sons, which we were very pleased about. Our name in that life was Isabel, and we found him to be quite good. We were surprised because we were expecting the worst. We had heard all the bad stories. We had been told by our own mother to say, you just have to endure. That's what you do. You endure. So it gave us a perspective on union in the physical reality that was quite different than what we thought it would be. That's just one life, one marriage out of 142. But it brings a credibility to something unexpected that looks bad, but when you get into it, unexpectedly, it turns out okay.
Hey, Veronica, this is a question about reincarnation, and basically it's, do we stop at some point reincarnating on this planet and then go on to other dimensions and other experiences and ... Does it go on forever? I mean, forever is a long time.
And may we state before we answer the question that once you're out of the linear, where time is marked minutially, there is no concept of time. And yes, it can go on eternally, but you're not marking time, so you won't feel it that way. Now, for the reincarnational process, it is a personal choice. There is no one sitting before you saying, "Oh, you must go back." Sorry, you just have to go back. We don't care if you want to or not. You're not going. You have to. You have to go back. None of that happens. When you are in your review of the current life, you make the decisions whether or not you want to come back into a physical linear reality. Many find it extremely tedious. Some find it abrasive. And the good news is that when you cross out and you're reviewing, you decide whether you want to do it again or not. It's up to you. Now, sometimes there are energies who say, I just need a break. The energy is so thick and dense. It's not that I don't like being there, but it's just hard. And I'd like a little time to not have to do that. There are many other dimensional spaces available for those who wish to continue their evolution, but it doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't even have to be on the earth plane. Now, it could be linear, but not on the earth plane, or you can maybe go to the Pleiades or the Orion, and you could go anywhere. But the important thing to know, it's your choice. There is no one dictating what you must do. There is counsel. There are those who will offer and express opinion about what might be a good idea. But it's a conversation. It's not someone saying you must. So that's how it works for the reincarnational process. It's up to you.
Thank you, Veronica. And now is the time when I ask Veronica to give me and you and the world her message for today.
When you awaken each day, decide it's going to be a good day. Decide that what runs through you positively, that as it runs through, you wish it to express itself outward and become part of the collective expression. Decide that every day is good. If there's some dramatics going on, let the dramatics do whatever it's going to do, and then get back to being who you are as a soul. Look around you. Find the beauty. Look at the moon. Look at the sun. Look at the stars. And exclaim to yourself that it is indeed a beautiful place. Yes, sometimes there are beings upon it that aren't so beautiful, but don't give them any energy. Only give energy to that which is beautiful and harmonic. If every single one of you did that, it would be a very different world. So, when you awaken tomorrow, decide that there is beauty everywhere. Decide that you're going to express that beauty in any way you can. If you're hit upon dramatics or you find yourself up to your knees in some sort of negativity, shake it off and say, this isn't where I want to be. I want to be in a state of harmony. And get yourself there. Do not be a victim to anything. You are the creator of your reality. You're not the victim of it. And change how you respond and how you think about it. It's there. It's available. And yes, you can do it.
Thank you, Veronica. And this concludes the interesting part of this broadcast. So I'll just mention that a couple of keys. There are 10 books in print that April has on Amazon. However, there are additional books on Kindle that only appear on Kindle, and I think there's 4 that come in mind. 2 are Reflections of a Spiritual Astronaut, which are basically one quote per page. I think they're profound, otherwise we wouldn't have published them that way. But there's 2 other books. One is written by 2 beings that some people may know of. One is Ish and one is Osco. If you get the newsletter for a while, you've seen some of their work, and it's quite good. There's another one called Advanced Channeling Sessions or something like that. And that has a lot of stuff in it, and it's from the early days, a lot of it, but it's direct transcripts. It's all was recorded and then put into book form. So if you're really into this stuff and you want to find out, all the details and, the backstage stuff, check out the Kindle books too. And now I'll just say, until next time, thank you.